Welcome back, everyone, to the third video of Chapter 10, Organizational Structure and Change. So let's dive right into it. We have Lewin's change model here, and the book describes this as a three-stage model, and it's a foundational approach to managing change. So think about changes that you've gone through, or maybe you were with an organization that did a change. One thing you have to understand is it says three stages. So we have a unfreeze, change, and then refreeze steps to this. And each one plays a critical role to ensure a successful change adoption by the organization. Remember, people prefer stability and predictability in their positions, in their roles. So this is a structured approach to help people with that. So let's talk about unfreeze. This involves breaking existing habits and routines. So think about your habits and routines. How do you feel when this is actually, when you actually experience a disruption to your habit or your routine? It kind of throws you off, doesn't it? But this is something that needs to happen to prepare for change. So this is where leaders communicate the need for change, and they create a sense of urgency to make these changes happen. So some strategies that happen is, conduct surveys to identify pain points, address employee concerns through open discussions. Usually you have, let's say a departmental meeting, and they bring everybody's free to bring up their concerns, and everybody talks about it openly. It's a good way for people to discuss this, because maybe someone else had a concern along the same lines, but they didn't know how to word it, or they didn't feel comfortable bringing it out into the open. Someone else might say your concern or their concern in this case. And in here, you can actually answer the question in front of everybody, and everybody can get that sense of, hey, they know what they're doing, kind of thing. So you can provide data, you can provide case studies that show how the change is going to be beneficial. But the biggest thing is to disrupt the current norms, the routines, the habits, the mindsets. Because if someone is still stuck in the mindset or the routine or the habits, they're not going to change too easy because they are comfortable. The change is going to make things uncomfortable. So a key challenge here is overcoming that resistance and inertia of people in their routines. So the second stage here, change. This is where we're actually making the change happen. Implementing that, we're in that implementation phase. New behaviors, processes, or technologies are actually introduced into everybody's existing habits and routines and mindsets. So employees need support. You have to maintain that open line of communication, make sure your employees are trained, understand what training they need, and maybe some training that they ask for that may be adjacent to what they're thinking about. Maybe they don't understand that what they're asking for is something separate. Maybe it's unrelated, but in their mind, it's related. So understanding your employees and provide that clear direction. This is what's going to help your employees to adapt to these changes. A strong leader. People like to follow leaders, and everybody has a preferred way of their leadership. Some strategies include providing the training to build the necessary skills. We talked about a little bit about training, encouraging participation and feedback from employees, getting that feedback, understanding what their thoughts and concerns are, even if it's anonymous. Some people won't speak up if they know that people know it's them that said it. Some people like to remain anonymous because they're afraid of what might happen or what they might be thought of because they ask certain questions. So this feedback, whether it's anonymous or it's in an open forum or an open discussion, is important. And depending on this feedback that you're getting from employees, you can adjust your plans. maybe you need to push things back another month, or maybe you need to push it back another day, or offer a different kind of training. All this is something you can figure out from the feedback you're getting from everybody. So this feedback, and especially adjusting your plans based on this feedback, improves effectiveness of the change. You get more people who want to change because they feel like they're being heard. So some challenges along this line here is ensuring employees engage with the change rather than reverting to old habits. Yeah, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, kind of phrasing. You can teach the employee how to do it. You can show them how to do it. They can show you that they know how to do it, but they've been doing it the other way for so long, they'll probably revert back or somehow try to change the new system to fit how the old system was or old way was. So that's a challenge that you have to overcome. You have to show them how the new way is better, or the new mindsets, or new habits, or new routine that is being encouraged. Once all these changes are implemented, you need to refreeze it. So you need to stabilize it and reinforce this new states or new status quo. This is something that companies often forget about. Is reinforcing the new way. Some people will think of, okay, we made the change, that's it. But people can revert back very easily. So we have to make sure that these changes are reinforced and institutionalized into the organization. And leaders must ensure that the new process becomes a part of the company's culture or company's standard operating procedures. It has to be the way it's done. The new status quo, the new, moving forward kind of thing. Some strategies along this is recognition and rewarding employees who are, let's say, champions of this new change. They're advocating for it. They're supporting it. They're encouraging others to adopt the change. Also, like I mentioned before, you have to update policies, maybe job descriptions and performance metrics to reflect these new expectations. What's the sense if you change how it's done, but you're still measuring people on the old way of doing things? So it's going to cause people to perform to the standard. What gets measured gets done. So if you're still measuring the old stuff, they're going to do the stuff to get measured to that old standard. So you have to update the standards and provide ongoing support. You got to make sure that people aren't just like dropped off the face of the earth. You got to keep maintaining let's say tech support or encouragement or things along that nature to make sure they stay there, and actually monitor to prevent people from going back to the old ways. One of the key challenges in this refreeze is maintaining that momentum and ensure to keep that long-term success of the change going. Like I mentioned earlier, kicking that snowball down the hill, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But if that snowball smacks into a tree, it's not going to get any bigger. But that momentum will keep that long-term success going. All right, so moving on here. We got Cotter's change model. This one is 8 steps, and I'll run through them kind of quick. But this is another way to implement organizational change. Some people like this one better because it kind of spreads it out into more focusing areas. What it is just actually getting the job done, just different points of view on it. So number one, just like in the other one, we have to kind of establish a sense of urgency. We give them that sense that we need to do it now. We can't wait to do it. Now, it's easy if you're trying to capitalize on a market trend or trying to beat a competitor to a certain thing. It's very easy to point to a sense of urgency there. But it's not always easy to do that. So providing some data, highlighting why it's necessary, do that kind of thing. With this, you have to avoid complacency. You have to keep pushing that urgency. If you push for that urgency, but then it dies off, no one mentions it again, people are going to be like, well, why was it so important then, but it's not important now? I'm sure we've all had people do that to us. They're like, "Oh, get it done, get it done, get it done." My son is the same way. He wants me to get something done, and then he'll forget about it. And it's like, it was critical that it happened then, and I couldn't do it right that second. But he's already on to 3 things down the line. So we have to avoid complacency and overcome that initial resistance. So the next one here, form a guiding coalition or build a guiding coalition. So we need to assemble a team. Hopefully we get people that are influential in the organization, and from different parts of the organization. So we want to have a diverse team along those lines. Even though the project might only affect finance or accounting or marketing, we still want to have representation from the other parts of the company. If supply chain is not going to be impacted by this change, they can still be a influencing member of the team to advocate for the change. It's not something that that we should avoid. We should get everybody on board with it. So these team members should have credibility and authority within the organization. So think about who you're putting on this team. Are they, a person from the mailroom who just got hired, who has no idea about the company, or is it some senior director who's got a little bit of authority behind them that can actually make things happen? So we have to make sure we maintain that. And also the alignment and collaboration among the coalition members. This can't be just something that's put together, let's say, for maybe an internal PR thing, and then these people don't come back together. They should be an active part of this process, because they're championing, they're advocating for this change. They're telling people how it's good. So the next one, we've got to form strategic vision or develop a vision for this change. Clearly define what the organization wants to achieve with the change. You're currently at whatever state. What is the future state that you're trying to get to? Why should people get to that future state? Having this strong vision helps employees understand the end goal. They understand what they're doing, and how, or they understand how what they're doing is going to get them to that end point. So they feel like they're contributing to that actual change, rather than sitting on the sidelines just watching it happen. One of the problems with creating a vision is that it is supposed to be ambitious, as a vision statement, but it has to be achievable too. So that's kind of a delicate balance there. Something that's ambitious, but yet achievable. So next thing, we have to communicate that vision. We have to enlist the volunteers. We got to get people on board. So once we communicate that vision out there, we need to make sure our leaders are consistent and transparently communicating that change vision. They all have to be saying the same thing. You can't have somebody say something different and then other people saying something else, because it will have mixed messages and people will get confused and they'll be like, well, they don't even know what they're talking about. So we want everybody to be on the same message when it comes to this change, same vision. So how do we do that? We hold town hall meetings, emails, or send out emails, get the leaders to make a little video that's sent out internally, to say how important this change is and what it's supposed to do for the company. So, of course, when you have these, you're going to have these open discussions, because you want to address and clarify the expectations. So when people look at change, they're going to be like, okay, what do I have to do to accomplish this change? And they're going to be like, well, that's a lot of work. Or they're going to be like, oh, I don't have to do anything. That's all on this other department. So we have to maintain the clear expectations. So a challenge in this one here is ensuring that communication is two-way, allowing for feedback. Some people don't like feedback. Other people will listen to feedback, but they don't do anything with it. We want to actually listen to that feedback and make adjustments based on that feedback. All right, so the next step here, removing obstacles, removing barriers. So we need to identify the barriers and then eliminate them because they're going to prevent a successful implementation of this change. The barriers could be outdated policies, resource constraints. We don't have enough money, we don't have enough people, we don't have enough equipment. Whatever the case may be, that's a constraint. It's a bottleneck in this change process. And of course, we have resistant employees. How do we make those employees go from resistors to this change to champions of this change, or at least not be a full-on resistor to the change? Maybe we can get them somewhere in the middle, where they're no longer actively trying to prevent the change, or maybe going against it. We want them to be supportive. So yes, they might not get all the way to champion where they're advocating for this change, but at least we can get them out of the way of saying that the change is bad. So how do we do that? There's a lot of ways. Communication being the key, and actually looking at things. This is a great time to update, these policies and procedures to make sure that they work well for our company. Some challenges here: structural and cultural obstacles to change. How the company is structured. And then, of course, our company culture can be an obstacle too. So we have to think about it. Is our formal structure or our informal structure preventing us? Is it our culture? The way we see ourselves, how we are within our company, is that the obstacle? How do we change that? The next thing here, we have to create short-term wins. Have little milestones. So we need to break down these bigger changes into smaller milestones, because we can celebrate the milestones and we can recognize and reward individuals more frequently. And this builds momentum because people like to, let's say, have a party where this is going to be, people are recognized. Let's say order pizza on a Thursday, something, or go out for drinks as a department to celebrate a successful milestone. Whatever the case may be, people like that kind of thing. So that would mean that they're going to work hard to get recognized or rewarded, especially if the reward is something that they want, such as a monetary reward, or in some cases it might be a promotion or additional responsibilities or more authority in their current position. Doesn't always have to be money, but money is a great motivator for a lot of people. But there are people who do not want money as a reward. So be careful with that. Key challenges here is that these short-term wins need to align with the long-term objectives, right? So think about what steps need to be done in order to accomplish the overall mission, the overall change. So break it down. This sometimes is a little difficult to make sure that, this step here, while it's necessary, it doesn't really make sense in the long-term objective, or it doesn't line up clearly to be connected to that. And people will be like, well, why are we doing this? Well, that comes down to communication. So communicate. So the next one here, we have to keep pushing forward or sustain that acceleration. Use that momentum, I should say, from these short-term wins to implement bigger changes, more sustained changes. People will see, well, we worked hard to make this change. We're going to keep this thing going. Reinforce that importance of that the change and prevents people from going back to the old ways. We don't want the old ways to get back in. Excuse me. Because when people start to regress, then it's causing more work, and you have to work extra hard to catch up or to redo some things to get back to where you were. So if we can avoid that extra work, it's awesome. All right, so the last one here, it says institute change or anchor that change in the culture. Ensure that these new processes, behaviors, mindsets are ingrained into the organization. Some strategies of this is actually incorporating these changes into training, performance reviews, company values. Like I mentioned earlier, what gets measured gets done. So make sure that this stuff is actually in there. And leadership needs to continuously reinforce the new way of doing things. Now, that's not saying that you should keep advocating for this new way 20 years after it's done. But you need to do it for a sustained period so people don't slip back into the old ways. And it's real easy to slip back into the old ways. So try everything you can to prevent that. Otherwise, you got to start to do it again. So, some key challenges here is that long-term sustainability and those old habits from coming back. Trying to prevent that because people are going to be like, because it's a habit or it's a mindset or it's just how the old procedures were, they're going to default to that and maybe not even know that they did it until they run into problems. So keep an eye on that. Because if you can keep an eye on that, communicate the message, it makes for a more successful change or implementation of the change. All right. So we have another one here, appreciative inquiry approach. So this one, sometimes people call it the 5Ds, the 5D process. So we start with define, establish the objective of this change process. What are we trying to do? So leaders will generally create a guiding question that frames the change in a positive light. So instead of something like, how do we fix communication issues? They'll change the wording and make it sound more positive. So it would be, how can we build a culture of open and effective communication? That is a lot better than how do we fix communication issues? That's negative, saying we have a problem, but it's not, there's nothing positive about that. So if we can change people's mindset from a problem solving, how do we fix issues, to an opportunity seeking, it makes a major advantage, because now it's not about we're doing something wrong and we need to fix it. It's about how can we get better. And a lot of people want to better themselves. So the next one here, discover. This is where we're exploring and identify existing strengths, best practices, and successful past experiences. So some of this is some strategies that we can use to discover. Conduct employees interviews to uncover moments of success. How understanding that our employees come from many different backgrounds. Maybe they did something similar at another organization and we can bring in that idea here. Or maybe there's something else within our own company that we can use. So we have to look at what's worked well in similar situations. So that's why I mentioned, employees coming from other companies, maybe they did it right, or maybe did it better, and then we're going forward. Or we want to take that and move it into our company. So there's a lot of ways to do that. And we have to make sure that that we deal with the challenge of ensuring employees recognize their own contributions to past successes. Everybody contributes in one way or another to the organization's success, but they might not know how they do it. So we want them to recognize that what they've done has actually led to where we are today. So the next step here, dream. So we want employees to visualize what the organization could look like at its best. Some strategies to do this, brainstorming. This one is very easy to do, brainstorm. And we can ask employees to design their ideal workplace or whatever the concern is that we're looking at. Storytelling exercises to create a compelling shared vision. That's a pretty useful one, but usually we start with something. So brainstorming might develop into storytelling. So we want employees to think big and go beyond constraints. We all have our natural barriers or constraints that we place on ourselves. Some of these might be, we think about our education, our abilities, our finances, and that limits us in our thinking sometimes, in our dreaming. But if we eliminated some of those constraints, what would our dream be then? So we're just looking at it in regards to the organization. If we had the budget for it, what could we do? If we had the personnel, what could we do? That kind of thing. The next step being design. This is where we create that structured plan for change. So we have that dream. We've created a vision. We've defined what we're actually doing. So how do we go about that? So we're designing actionable steps and strategies to bring the dream into reality. So we get employee buy-in on this. So we get employees to collaborate and co-create solutions, aligning with the organization's strengths. So everybody kind of has an idea of what their company's good at or what their company has a strength in. So how do we go take that strength and use that to achieve that dream? So if the dream is to improve teamwork, this design phase may focus on creating a mentorship program or collaborative workspaces because of that teamwork. People are already working well together. How can we enhance that? So collaborative workspaces, mentorship programs, there's a couple ways to do it. So some key challenges here is aligning ideas with organizations' resources and capabilities. So this is where we kind of have to bring in those, we have to bring back those constraints a little bit. Yes, we don't have all the funding in the world. Yes, we don't have all the talent that we need to accomplish some things. So we have to think, well, what can we do? Even though we don't have X, Y, or Z, right? So the next one here, destiny. This is where we have to implement these changes through that design to accomplish the dream and so on and so forth. But once we implement those changes, we have to reinforce those changes to keep the continuous engagement of our employees. So leaders, of course, play a critical role. I mean, you guys as leaders, you're leading your people. So you're going to advocate or should advocate for maintaining momentum and recognizing progress, because not everybody can understand that what the progress was going on. They just know that, all right, I had to do all this extra work or this alternative work, but I don't know what happened with it. Well, as a leader, you can tell them what that was used for. And people will feel better. They're like, okay, yeah, I contributed. Oh, I contributed more than I thought I did. And that gives people some pride. So we have to celebrate team achievements. We have to make sure these new behaviors get into the company culture. And of course, there are some challenges to this. Of course, like I've mentioned before, we have to try and avoid reverting back to old habits. If we go back to the old way of doing things, we're not making progress. So, all right. Next thing here, we have complex adaptive systems approach, or CAS. This one is, it evolves. It looks at the organization as an evolving system, responding to the internal and external environments. So organizations are complex adaptive systems. So this suggests that organizations evolve through spontaneous and interconnected actions. So employees and teams self-organize based on needs and opportunities rather than following strict managerial directives. So this one's a little bit more free flow based on that. But this also presents some challenges here, because leaders must balance providing guidance while allowing for this decentralized decision making they have to give up some of their authority or some of their power to allow this to happen. So this self-organizing or emergent changes, you know, change happens organically in this approach through collaboration and an iterative learning process. So people talking to each other, they're trying something, seeing, oh, this didn't work, so we're going to take that our knowledge now and do it again. So there's that feedback loop that is going on to help people learn, that iterative learning. So teams adapt their processes in response to real world challenges rather than waiting to be told what to do. They actually just go ahead and take the initiative. So this is often something you see in like companies like Google or Spotify. They use agile methodologies, let's say for project management. This allows teams to adjust workflows dynamically. So the team, if they're making quicker progress, they can adjust their workflow. If they're slower for whatever reason, they can adjust their workflow. They're still making progress. It's just they control their workloads. So the challenge here is assuring that alignment across the organization while allowing autonomy. You don't have somebody directing the work being done. You just maybe have someone saying, this is what needs to be done, and your people do it. They figure it out and get it done. So this is more of a hands-off approach. So what is the role of leadership in this? Well, leaders act as facilitators rather than decision makers or authoritarian decision makers. They're making sure that things are actually moving forward, but they're not being dictators, we'll say, or micromanagers. They're asking, hey, do you have everything you need to get the job done? If the team says no, this is what else we need, well, that leader tries to get what that team needs. So the leaders, their focus on this is to creating conditions for this adaptability rather than enforcing the rules or strict rules. Allow some give. As long as the rules aren't broken, it should be fine. But if the rules are bent a little bit, maybe that's acceptable, depending on the rule, of course. So encouraging that open dialogue, that communication, removing obstacles if there are any, giving them the resources they need, and fostering a culture of experimentation. Yes, experimentation. Not everything will be successful. There are going to be some failures. But the big thing about failure is learning from it. So leaders need to shift from the traditional command and control leadership to empowering and enabling their people. Making sure their people have what they need to get the job done and the ability to make decisions that they need to make to get the job done. So this is tough for some leaders to get into because it's not the traditional way of doing things. So some leaders, they don't want to give up that authority, but they have to in this style here. So this decentralized decision making, it is distributed across the levels of the organization, all the way down to maybe even the individual employee spot. So it encourages these frontline employees to take initiative based on real-time data and feedback. They're looking at what's actually happening out there, and they can make decisions. So, for example, the healthcare industry, frontline workers make patient care decisions instead of waiting for managerial approval. There's probably already a set, in the healthcare industry, there's probably a medical protocol that is already established saying, okay, if this happens, go ahead and do these things. You're allowed to do these things without asking permission. It's the same thing in business. You're kind of given boundaries of decisions that you can make without having to ask up the chain. So the challenge with this, though, is balancing this autonomy with accountability. So if you're giving that power down to people, they have to be accountable for how they use that power. And we also may need to make sure that this coordination across teams too. We can't have one team that kind of develops into a super team that is now dictating to others using more of that traditional command and control leadership style. We need to make sure that we're watching that. All right, so balancing structure and change. So we've gone through a lot of this here, and that comes down to stability and adaptability. Mechanistic structures offer the efficiency, reliability, and control, while the organic structures foster creativity, innovation, and responsiveness. And it's key to integrate both of these into the organization. Like I mentioned in the first video, you have to have both. The ratio will vary company to company, location to location, but you have to have both in there. You might have a little bit of one, but it's needed. So an example here, a manufacturing company may require a rigid supply chain, mechanistic, but an innovative product development team. So that organic type structure, because that creativity and innovation and responsiveness. So supply chain, yeah, we're, being a supply chain professional, the efficiency, reliability, and the control of our supply chain is essential for how we do business, our industry. But, we rely on research and development, marketing, finance, accounting. We rely on these, and we have to be able to interact with their styles, their structures, mechanistic or organic. There are tensions between these structures, though. So organizations evolve over time, and they will adjust their structure according to what is needed by the organization. But maintaining a balance where one doesn't, let's say, dominate the other one too much, is the cross-functional collaboration, where functional areas actually talk to each other. It's not a walled garden where supply chain doesn't talk to anybody else, or marketing doesn't talk to supply chain. It's not that. We have to work together to accomplish what we need to for the company. So we need to maintain accountability, but maybe we can do some flexibility in the work policies to make this happen. So we have to prevent the bureaucracy from slowing down innovation, because that's going to lead to our competitors getting ahead of us. But we have to ensure we have structure in our organization to maintain consistency. Of course, aligning or managing culture, making sure our people are ready for change. We have to make sure those changes that we're doing are aligned with our business goals, company cultures, employee engagements. We have to engage everybody here. Leaders should foster an adaptive mindset, communicating that clear vision, listening to people, provide resources and training to help employees navigate the change. This is the job of leaders and management, to make sure that their employees can actually make the change happen. All right, some key challenges in this one here: ensuring employees feel secure in the changing environment while maintaining forward momentum. Not every change is going to be good for all employees, but they should feel comfortable and confident that they're making a difference, that they're secure in their job, and secure in their long-term status with the organization. So these are definitely concerns, and it's going to take a long time for each of you to learn how to do this. This is not something that's done overnight. It's going to take you some time. I'm still, figuring some of this stuff out, and I've been doing supply chain for over 20 years. And, there's always something new to learn. All right. So in summary, being the third video out of 3, organizational structure is important. We need a structure, whether it's formal or informal, mechanistic or organic. We need that structure to provide clarity, efficiency, and accountability within the organization. Different structures serve different business needs. And depending on where you guys head, different industries will have different ratios between the two. And different functions within companies in those industries will have different needs. But when it comes down to it, a well-designed structure aligns with the company's goals and external environment. Change is inevitable. It must be managed strategically. We have to have a purposeful process when we're doing change. This change might be forced upon us by market forces, technology, developments, and both internal and external to our organization. But these changes are meant to help us stay competitive and innovative with our products and services. And of course, leadership. I'm hoping you guys kind of caught on to this. Leadership is a key to success here. Leaders must ensure that the structure supports both efficiency and adaptability. Leaders are essential in communicating change, overcoming resistance, and fostering an adaptive culture. That's you guys. Communication is just as important as you guys as a leader. So successful organizations empower employees and encourages participation in shaping change initiatives. The employees can be involved. So we want them to participate. We don't want them sitting on the sideline, because if they're sitting on the sideline, maybe they're going to be disgruntled and cause issues. Who knows? But we want them to feel like they're part of the process. So while this chapter is relatively short, there is a lot of material in here, and this is a lot of information that you guys will come across in your careers. So definitely take a chance to take this all to heart, and it won't guide you wrong. It will actually set you guys up for future success. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch these videos and listen to me ramble for long periods of time. And instead of in the classroom, you guys can be wherever you guys want to be with this. So you guys have a great week. I will see you guys on the following Monday. And yeah, enjoy your weekend.